Hello, welcome. I want to wish everyone a good evening and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Andrea and I work with the marketing team here at the Strand. We are so happy that everyone could be here. Before we launch into our discussion of Mona's novel, Bunny, I'd like to share a little bit about the history of the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled down to 48 bookstores until after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass Whiten. We want to thank you all for your support, because without your loyal community of book lovers, we wouldn't be here today. We're excited to have with us Mona Awad, who is celebrating the paperback release of her novel, Bunny. Mona will be joined in conversation by none other than Margaret Atwood. Tonight's event will be moderated by Strand's own Sabir Sultan. Mona is the author of 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl, a finalist for the Scotiabank Geller Prize that won the Colorado Book Prize, the Amazon Canada First Novel Award, and an honorable mention from the Arab American Book Awards. The recipient of an MFA in fiction from Brown University and a PhD in English and creative writing from the University of Denver. She has published work in Time, Vice, Electric Literature, McSweeney's, Los Angeles Review of Books, and elsewhere. Tonight, Mona will be joined by Margaret Atwood. Margaret, whose works has been published in more than 45 countries, is the author of more than 50 books of fiction, poetry, critical essay, and graphic novels. Her latest novel, The Testaments, is a co-winner of the 2019 Booker Prize. It is also the long-awaited sequel of The Handmaid's Tale, a now award-winning television series. Her other fiction includes Cat's Eye, shortlisted for the 1989 Booker Prize, Alias Grace, which won the Geller Prize in Canada, The Blind Assassin, winner of the 2000 Booker Prize, the Mad Adam Trilogy, and Hagseed, to name a few. She is the recipient of several awards, including the Peace Prize of the German Book Trade, the Franz Kafka Prize, the Penn Center of U.S. Lifetime Achievement Award, and the Los Angeles Times Innovator Award. In 2019, she was made a member of the Order of the Companions of Honor for Services to Literature. She currently lives in Toronto. Moderating for tonight's authors is our very own Sabir, who is the Director of Events at Strand, coordinating all of these wonderful virtual events for us. So big ups to him. Without further ado, please let me introduce Mona Awad and Margaret Atwood.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very grateful because this is a very special event for me. It's so incredible to be speaking with Margaret Atwood. Margaret, I just want to thank you so much for being here tonight. Your work has just been so important to my reading life. I remember reading The Robber Bride when I was a teenager, and I bought it from the world's biggest bookstore in Toronto, where I worked part-time. And the book was just so brilliant and fun and wicked, and I loved the elements of fairy tale and the Gothic, and that it was set in Toronto. I just remember being so excited by it and by what stories could do and what kind of magic they could offer. And I've felt that way with every book of yours that I've read, from The Edible Woman to The Testament. So thank you. Your work just lights me up, even the darkest aspects of it. And I want to thank the Strand. You're one of my favorite bookstores on the planet, so it's doubly a dream come true to be doing this event with you and for you to be hosting us tonight. And I can't wait to be there in person at some point, but browsing the stacks and the tables, but it's great to be here virtually. So I'm just going to start by reading the first page or so of Bunny. And just for context, Bunny is a novel about, and it's set at a New England college, and it's about a clique of young women who call each other Bunny. They're graduate students, and they move and speak as one. And the story is told from the perspective of a woman named Samantha, who's also a student there, and she's an outsider, and she hates the bunnies, but she ends up kind of getting sucked into their clique and then going down this very dark, violent, magical rabbit hole. and actual rabbits are involved. And that's all I'll say. And I'll just read the first page. So it starts at a college party in the fall, and Samantha is seeing the bunnies from across the way, and she's just feeling all the feelings. We call them bunnies because that is what they call each other. Seriously, bunny. Example. Hi, bunny. Hi, bunny. What did you do last night, bunny? I hung out with you, bunny. Remember, bunny? That's right, bunny. You hung out with me, and it was the best time I ever had. Bunny, I love you. I love you, bunny. And then they hug each other so hard, I think their chests are going to implode. I would even secretly hope for it from where I sat, stood, leaned in the opposite corner of the lecture hall, department lounge, auditorium, bearing witness to 4 grown women, my academic peers, cooingly strangle each other hello, or goodbye, or just because you're so amazing, bunny. How fiercely they gripped each other's pink and white bodies, forming a hot little circle of such rib-crushing love and understanding, it took my breath away. And then the nuzzling of ski jump noses, peach fuzzy cheeks, temples pressed against temples in a way that made me think of the labial rubbing of the bonobo or the telepathy of beautiful, murderous children in horror films. All 8 of their eyes shut tight as if this collective asphyxiation were a kind of religious bliss. All 4 of their glossy mouths making squealing sounds of monstrous love that hurt my face. I love you, bunny. I quietly prayed for the hug implosion all year last year, that their ardent squeezing might cause the flesh to ooze from the sleeves, neck holes, and A-line hems of their cupcake dresses like so much inane frosting, that they would get tangled in each other's Game of Thrones hair, choked by the ornate braids they were forever braiding into each other's heart-shaped little heads, that they would choke on each other's blandly grassy perfume. Never happened. Not once. They always came apart from these embraces intact and unwounded, despite the ill will that poured forth from my staring eyes like so much comic book villain venom. Smiling at one another, swinging clasped hands, skins aglow with affection and belonging as though they'd just been hydrated by the purest of mountain streams. Bunny, I love you. Completely immune to the disdain of their fellow graduate student me, Samantha Heather Mackey, who is not a bunny, who will never be a bunny. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for starting us off with that delightful and hilarious reading. I think it does a good job of setting up the novel for us. So we know our protagonist, Samantha Heather Mackey, is an MFA student at a prestigious university, Warren University. But so why was a MFA program the right sort of setting for this novel?
Well, you know, just for context, so an MFA is a Master of Fine Arts, right? It's a creative writing degree, and you do it. It's usually 1 to 3 years. You go in, and you know, with the help of your peers and your advisors, the goal is to produce a manuscript at the end of it. If you're a novelist, you go in and write a novel. If you're a poet, poems, etc. And you know, when I went and did my MFA, I couldn't help but feel during and after that it would be great fodder for a horror novel, or a fairy tale, or a satire. So I kind of wrote all 3. You know, and it's funny thinking about it because, you know, it's fairy tale in a way because it is potentially transformative. You know, you're creating something out of nothing, or that, you know, something that wasn't there before. And where I think the humor and the horror come in is that it's just a supercharged atmosphere filled with hopes and dreams and despair. And there's, you know, so much rivalry and ambition going on, but it's all very polite and it's all under the surface. But if you dig at that surface just a little bit, you can drop down into darker territory very quickly, I think, you know.
Well, so then, Margaret, how did you think the setting worked with the like aspects of the novel from like fairy tale to horror? Did the MFA program work for you too? Did it make sense? Did it resonate?
Okay, I'm so old that there weren't any MFA programs Thank you, Providence. There weren't any. So I think there was one in Iowa, and they had just started some kind of creative writing school out in British Columbia, but that was kind of it. So we're going way back in time to 1961. So I never experienced such a thing as a student, although I have taught sort of intermittently, sort of parachuted in guest person, ta-da, small amount of time and then out again. So I never really experienced the full horror. But you have made me very grateful that I'm so old. Thank you. Yeah, it does sound like a kind of pit of vipers. However, to give such programs credit, I think they have worked and do work for some people.
Okay.
Some people can get things out of them. And I downloaded my brain onto a masterclass program. But of course, there's no interaction with that. You're not with a room full of other students. So you sometimes feel that what people learn in such programs is not how to write. They learn how to be in the program.
Yeah.
So they learn what is expected, what the moves are, what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to do. We used to make a joke that all you had to say is, doesn't work for me.
Yeah, right.
You don't have to explain why or anything. So I think there's good ones and bad ones, and you've given us the bad one.
Yes.
But you've also given us, and I think this has probably horrified you, Sabir, what really goes on in groups of female people sometimes.
Well, I think that like sort of segues nicely into the idea of sort of like when we talk about who fits in these cliques in MFA programs and who's just learning how to function within one. Samantha's very much an outsider. Like she's not my favorite phrase from the book, a daughter of wolf. Like she's sort of an outsider in terms of class, in terms of personality. So I was curious to how you both interpreted how her outsider status sort of shaped the novel and shaped her interactions with the other women.
Well, there's various kinds of outsiders, and she vacillates between being a pathetic outsider and being a really cool outsider. Mm-hmm. So there is something about her that the other ones envy.
Yes.
It's not so, Mona.
Yeah. That's right. No, I think that's very true. They do want something from her. They want something. And so they kind of alienate her the first year, and we don't see that in the book. It starts with their sudden interest in her after they've alienated her. And she's already built up all of this kind of psychological armor to kind of deal with the fact that they've alienated her. And I think that is making her experience of them and their kindness to each other all the more horrific. The fact that they have bonded and she is still outside is for her a source of anger, confusion, terror. It makes her afraid to go to class, afraid to contribute. And yet I think she desperately wants their attention as well.
And that is a real question mark because they sound so horrible. But on the other hand, yeah, they're very pretty, witty, itty bitty.
Yes.
Which is not. But on the other hand, what they probably want from her is authenticity.
Yes, that's exactly.
They know in a way they're putting on an act for one another, and that they don't have, fundamental grit. They think that she's somehow more in touch with real life.
Yeah.
Which sometimes she is and sometimes she isn't. But let's go into the weirder aspects of this novel so that watchers can get a flavor. What are they really up to during their workshop nights?
Yeah, so what they do very ritualistically is gather together and conjure men out of actual bunnies.
And how does that work, Mona? I mean, what sort of men come out?
So they are handsome in rather very kind of conventional ways. They are suited men.
They have
And
suits on.
yeah,
They're
they have
suits. Yeah.
they have suits on. So, you know, they kind of conjure, they put a bunny in a circle, in the center of a circle, and the bunny, there's a violent kind of thing that happens. I don't want to an explosion. Yes.
The bunny explodes. Yeah.
And then there's a doorbell rings, and there's a knock on the door, and a man in a suit shows up saying all the right things, sort of, to them. You know, courtship type phrases, you know.
Plus admiration of their genius.
So much admiration, you know, endless admiration of their genius. But they have, you know, some things missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we hint at what those things are?
We should. They are, you know, essential sexual
bits.
yes.
They also don't have very good hands.
Yes,
They're wearing gloves.
that's right.
But what I really like about them is that they have names like Heathcliff and Rat, like Rat Butler and Gone with the Wind. I mean, they're sort of romantic hero names. So they have these romantic hero names. They say sort of movie things plus admiration for their genius. And then they just get kind of discarded.
Yes.
So I was wondering whether you were inspired by Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, I wanted to play a little bit with, you know, at least subvert the idea, this idea of that, you know, that male kind of tendency to objectify and fetishize and make, you know, kind of sexual pets out of women, you know.
Well, ears and the tails. You might be too young to actually remember that, but they did have ears and tails Playboy bunnies. So in this version, it's the female people who are making fetishized objects out of actual bunnies. So instead of making women into rabbits, they're making rabbits into men.
Yes, that's right.
Not very well in both cases.
Not very well in both cases, and it was very, very fun to kind of write those bunny men and their attempts at courtship with their, you know, with wanting, you know, capabilities was so much fun. And it's fun too to think about how the bunnies kind of cloak this ritual in this kind of lofty artistic pursuit. You know, it's this thing that we're doing. We're like subverting the patriarchy. We're, you know, we're kind of reimagining what it is to talk about the body and stuff like that. But what they're really doing is just making bunny boy pets for themselves. You know,
that reflect their own desires.
Yes, exactly. And I love how, you know, when you do kind of cloak other motivations in these kind of loftier pursuits, those other motivations inevitably betray you. And certainly the bunny boys betray the bunnies in that way.
So I guess you've had more up close experience with literary theory than I have, Mona.
Not really, I would say. not at that school. It was more kind of very, very craft focused, actually. But you would hear a lot of it. The students loved to sort of talk about it. So it would be kind of conversations that people were having, but nothing that we were actually asked to really read ourselves. But it is funny to think about the ways in which those kinds of conversations inform the way that people in creative writing programs, and this is not always the case, but sometimes the case, informs their approach to creativity. And that's where I find it funny, because to me, I've never really been able to articulate what happens when I'm, you know, creating a story. It's just, I don't use that kind of language. I've never been comfortable using it when I'm talking about creativity. So it was very foreign to my ears to be hearing it. And I think that's part of the reason why I had some fun with it, you know.
Can I ask you about Veronica Tartley?
Oh yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, you can. Oh my God.
Okay, so Veronica.
Yeah.
Patron saint of photographers. Did you do that on purpose?
No, I didn't.
No, was it Veronica out of Archie Comics?
A little bit,
A little
and
bit.
maybe
Okay.
a little Veronica Lake too.
Look, Veronica Lake. Okay, and Tartley sort of speaks for itself.
Yes,
So that was your pseudonym when
yeah.
you were writing a column for Maison Veronica Tartley. I love it.
Oh my God. You just,
So you're no stranger to people having disguises.
no, I love them.
Oh, yeah.
I love them.
There's a couple of other characters in the book who are also pretty strange. So the Ada woman, who is Samantha's friend,
Yes.
did you get her from Swan Lake?
No, that's kind of an interesting story. I don't want to reveal too much
Okay.
about the, you know, the sort of genesis of Ava, but
Sorry,
yeah, no, her name is kind of drawn.
As in Avon,
Yes.
Stratford upon.
Yes, that's right. But yeah, no, that is kind of drawn from her origins, you know, her origin story. Yeah.
Yes. And then there's a mysterious man who finally appears.
Yes.
I was very interested in him.
Yeah, me too.
But we won't go into that. He's the sort of non-bunny man that Samantha herself manages to create. And he's quite a different story from the bunny men of the bunnies.
Yes,
very different from them.
Yeah, she doesn't have I mean, the bunnies, the thing that they do with these bunny boys is they can control them to a degree. I mean, obviously they are wild, and so they do, you know, run off and bite and do all kinds of things and get in all kinds of trouble. But you know, Samantha doesn't really have control in the same way over her
Creation.
her man, yeah, her creation. She just does not have that control. He is not a pet in any way.
Not at all. No. So the difference between a wild novel and a tame novel.
Yeah, I think that was what I was interested in exploring there, you know, it's just that notion of consciousness and creativity, and how much being consciously aware of what you're doing and wanting a certain outcome will flatten something and not give it the life that I think is what makes stories so exciting. My favorite stories have that kind of life. Your books have that life, and so I was interested in exploring that idea that the creator just is not in control of their creation, and how far that could potentially go, you know.
Far, Samantha.
Yes, very far. Yeah.
Slightly pivoting off of that, I think it raises a good point of Samantha's unable to sort of differentiate between her like creations and reality to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious about that connection between perception, reality, and like projection, like what she imagines into the world.
Yeah, I think they all kind of inform each other, you know, there's no question about that. You know, she sort of sees herself one way, sees herself as an outsider, and that further magnifies her outsiderness, you know, in relation to the bunnies. It further alienates her from them, that she sees herself this way. She's spinning this kind of dark story about what's going on, you know, and actually makes it come to life in some ways, you know. It's sort of like a you know, she's kind of, it's like a I don't know what the word that I'm looking for is, sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy is what I mean. But I think her desires are also coming out in her creations. You know, she's an artist, the bunnies are artists. They're actually making their own reality. And that's what was fun about playing with reality and the imagination in the book, was that these are people who are kind of creating an alternate reality for themselves to live inside. Samantha gets lost in hers, but the bunnies can create these lines. But Samantha is also, on the other hand, exciting to them because she can't create those lines, you know, and maybe they want a little bit of that danger.
Quite a bit of it.
Yeah, quite a bit of it. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and while we're sort of generally talking about the bunnies, I'd be curious to hear, like, Mona, who was your favorite one to write, and Margaret, which one was your favorite to read about? For the audience, there are 4 of them, vignette, creepy doll, cupcake, and then the Duchess.
Mm.
Yeah.
So those are their nicknames that Samantha gives them. Those are not their real names.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that substance they're always eating? Pink something? Pinkberry.
Yeah, pinkberry. Yeah.
So they have a lot of pink in their lives.
They have a lot of pink in their lives. I love that kind of, I mean, cute things do kind of terrify me in a lot of ways because they are just so powerful. And they do have a kind of monstrousness to them. So I really kind of played with that with the bunnies. I made them monstrous in that pink kind of cutesy way. And they're terrifying to Samantha because of that hyper feminine kind of cutesiness that they have.
Big-eyed, pink and frilly.
That's right.
Yes. So I would say my favorite was the Duchess.
Me too. Yeah.
Well, she was more hard-nosed than the other ones, I would say.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
The controlling one of the four of them.
Yeah, she was.
Stuff takes place at her house. So insofar as it's a coven with a leader, she's probably more of a coven leader than the others are.
Yeah, that's why I love her too. I love her because she just has so much power, and she has the power to manipulate Samantha. I also love her like art of choice. She doesn't write poems or prose. She writes promes, and she does it with a dagger-shaped diamond on glass. And I think that's really fun. So she amuses me.
I think that's really, really pretentious, Samantha.
Exactly. Yeah, she was so much fun to write because she did have so much power, but she's also she's absurd, so she's kind of both. She's formidable, but it's silly. Yeah.
Well, there was sort of like with the proems, one of the like fun things which happens is there's a lot of skewering which happens, a lot of like satirizing, and I thought the various like writing, the way the various bunnies wrote were kind of hilarious, like the description of each one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really fun to write too. I mean, it's just and in part it's just something that ends up coming up when you share work with various groups. There are types of stories that always emerge. And I mean, I'm definitely making fun of myself there too, because I have certainly written, over the top fairy tales and submitted them to workshop. And and now I look at them and I cringe and think they're so
in those programs.
Yeah, they are. They're usually very young, mostly in their 20s. I actually did my MFA much later. I was in my 30s. And I really did it because I wanted to make time and space to finish my book. It was my thesis at Brown was 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl. It was my first book.
Did you pass?
I did pass. I
Good.
did. And a quote from Lady Oracle is in the epigraph of that book.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, that I love that line so much.
So what do you have to do to fail an MFA program? How would you actually fail? Does anybody ever fail?
I'm sure that they do, but I don't know anyone who has.
You would have to just not be there, I guess.
I think you
never show up.
That's right. I think there are people who drop out.
Yeah.
I almost dropped out of mine. I really did. I mean, and I felt so fortunate to be able to get in because it was a funded program, and it was great to have that time. But I almost dropped out just because I wasn't fully confident in my project, and you can just get in your head the way that you do when you're writing, and I almost left. So
were other people being mean to you, Mona?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they were, but I don't think that they were. You know what I mean? Like, I think that you're so raw when you're in those kinds of settings. Artists are so sensitive to begin with, but I think you're just hyper raw when you're sharing work with strangers. And, I think it's so easy to misinterpret people's intentions and criticisms, especially when you're also being asked. So you're raw, you're vulnerable, and you're also being asked to be imaginative at the same time.
Right.
you know, that's like a perfect storm of just, you
So
know,
what if you're imaginative in the wrong way, which is partly what your book is about?
yeah, it's an exploration of that, you know.
Very imaginative, but just a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and then on the like sort of subject of the imagination, I think we've touched on like how the book operates in a horror aspect, a satire aspect. It works as a fairy tale, but it's also just like rife with illusions. So like there are references to Heathers, the Crafts, Alice in Wonderland. I think like how did you balance sort of juggling all of those, but still keeping your originality? Like it reads as like its own novel despite pulling from all of these sources.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I was very consciously aware of it. I mean, I think I knew it was a book about transformation, like fundamentally about that. And I knew it was a book about the imagination, you know? And so to me, I just go to, you know, fairy tales and myths have been the stories that I've loved since childhood. And this book goes deep into the notion of like the birth of the imagination and you know, and kind of its genesis and so so I think fairy tale and myth we're so much a part of it because it's about the transformative power of the imagination, and that's what fairy tales really explore, is those kinds of transformations. So and as for the kind of the, you know, the teen movies and things like that, yes, I definitely was watching a lot of those when I was working on Bunny. I wasn't reading other books, but I was watching those because those girl clique movies like Heathers and like The Craft and like Mean Girls, they're just so much fun. And there is a quality to just being back in school, writing about school. You know, the kind of clique narratives and outsider narratives that teen movies explore, they were just fun to kind of keep in my head while I was working on Bunny. I wanted that energy in the book, you know, because they don't take themselves that seriously, and that's important, you know. Bunny doesn't take itself terribly seriously, even though it's about,
It's pretty dark.
It's very high stakes. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you ever watch Miss Congeniality?
I haven't watched it, no.
I think you would like it quite a lot. What about you, Sabir?
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll watch it.
So she's actually an undercover agent, but she has to pretend to be a contestant in a Miss America contest in order to figure out the who's the criminal, as it were. It's recommended. It's very funny.
I will watch it for sure.
It does.
Yeah, in return, I will watch Heathers, which I've never watched.
Oh, it's so fun. You will love it. You will love it. Yeah.
Does it have a nice ending?
You gotta see.
Tell.
It has a worthwhile ending. I will say.
Worthwhile ending.
Yeah.
You mean it makes you, the watcher, feel good?
Sort of.
Okay, being very, very mysterious here. Okay.
It's so good though. You will love it.
I will love it. Okay. All right. It's on my list.
Yeah.
And then, so we're going to have to turn over to audience questions in about 5 minutes or so. But one question I wanted to ask you, Margaret, was what was one of your favorite scenes in the book?
My favorite scene is well, I don't want to give too much away, but I would say, and then we get into what is really satisfying. I would say when it's Samantha's turn to try to turn a bunny into a man. Yeah. And what the result is. I think that's pretty good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I loved writing that scene. It was a very high stakes moment for her because she's being asked to perform this conjuring trick that they all can do, and now they're seeing it's like a test, you know.
Yeah, will she be up to it?
Exactly. And they kind of, you know, I mean, she feels like they want her to fail.
They do want her to fail.
So that was really fun, and I loved writing the scene after that. You know, it's I don't want to, you know, spoil too much, but yeah, it's great to kind of follow through with like what actually ends up happening after that scene, after she's tried and failed, you know.
So are you familiar at all with the graphic cartoon work of Kate Beaton?
No,
Aton.
no.
Okay, so you would like a book of hers called Hark, a Vagrant. She was an English and literature and history student who found that she had a talent for drawing. So she does riffs on, for instance, Jane Eyre.
Oh,
She has a Jane Eyre to die for. Her Dracula is the thing of beauty and a joy forever. And other pieces of literature and history that she does, rather satirical, actually. Yes, very satirical drawings of. That's why you would like it.
okay, I'm excited. I love Jane Eyre so much. So,
Well, this is a Jane Eyre that you have not seen before.
okay, I'm excited.
Oh, before we pivot to audience questions, I was curious. I know the book has been optioned, and I was wondering, Margaret, if you had any advice on sort of navigating the like book to television process.
Television process is not in the hands of Mona.
Yeah.
So it's been optioned. Other people then come in. They will have a writing team, and they will send Mona the scripts. She will be able to comment on them, but she doesn't have ultimate power. So she can make suggestions, but they are not necessarily suggestions that will be followed. So that's about what it's like. Well, be serious. Nobody is going to put millions of dollars into a project and give the writer the last say.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it, because usually writers hate the film and television work made of their books. And so you put lots of millions of dollars in, and then the writer says, well, we're not doing this because I don't like the tie that you've put on that character. So that doesn't happen, but you're a consulting producer or something, Mona? You have a title?
Yeah, I have a title. Yeah, I think I'm an executive producer. So I've done exactly what you said, though, exactly what you just described. I've been given a script and I've made comments and given them, and that's it. That's what I've done. Yeah. But the writer is great. I love the writer. So.
Yeah, and it'll be very interesting for you. And it is a lot like summer camp. So either you love the people and the weather's great and you have a fine time, or you hate the people and it rains all the time, but you can't get out. So let us hope that you have the first experience.
Oh, I hope so too.
Yes, I hope so. I think you will have lots of fun.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so our first audience question is from John Fram, who asks, the novel takes a frankly hallucinatory turn in the second half. How difficult did you find it to balance the need to keep the reader on the same page versus indulging the authorial pleasure of just pure and wild language?
I mean, I definitely didn't want to lose the reader, but the character Samantha, she is on a journey, you know, and she is deep in the world of she's deep in the bunny world. I mean, there is a point in the book where she kind of does get sucked into the clique, and she doesn't even know herself anymore. So that headspace, it was so much fun to be in that headspace. And it is meant to be very kind of, you know, it's meant to be wild. It's meant to be a trip. She's being brainwashed and she's in a cult. So I wanted the reader to feel some disorientation, you know, and it does have an element of horror, this book, and disorientation, destabilizing reality is part of that, is part of the joy of horror. So I didn't want the reader to not have that.
Okay. And then, so this is a question for both of you. It's from Lauren Akampora, who asks, do either of you ever dream about your characters? Conversely, do your dreams ever make their way into your books?
Okay.
Mona.
Okay. I do dream about my characters. I got so lost in this book. I mean, I still miss it. You know, I miss being inside of it. So I did dream about the characters. I don't know that a dream got into the actual book, though. think I daydream when I walk, and I imagine scenarios in the daydreams, but I can't remember like dreaming at night and then putting something in Bunny. What about you, Margaret?
Let's see, the question was two-part. Do I ever dream about my characters? No, I dream about my settings.
Oh, okay.
Not characters so much. Do other dreams that I have ever get into my work? Yes, they do. So I think there's two kinds of dreams, the kind of vague, nonsensical kind of dream that doesn't really mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are certain dreams that pop out at you and you really do remember them quite clearly, and they're meaningful. So intentional dreaming. Some people are interested in it and other people are not. If you want to do an experiment, you can keep a notebook beside your bed and write down whatever you can remember in the morning and see if it ultimately adds up to anything.
So our next question is from Rebecca Bernard, who says, I love Bunny and it's such a unique concept. How in the world did you pitch it?
Pitch it. Well, I had to write it and then and finish it. But maybe she means like, how did I query it or something like that? Or I guess I just, I've always sort of said that it's kind of a love letter to the relationship between loneliness and the imagination, and how those two dance together, and they dance together in such scary and strange and funny ways. And that is like the core of the book. That's where it all kind of comes from, is the relationship between those two things. And then also the notion of bunnies. I love bunnies because they're so culturally charged. It's such a loaded term, and it was so much fun to play with. They hold such conflicting energy, because as sweet as Bunny sounds to me, it also has whispers of horror, and whispers of cruelty in it, and magic. So, yeah.
To ask a question for myself, I was sort of curious. With the bunnies, they were perpetually described as white, and I thought that was just like a odd note. Was there a reason for that?
I think that's how Samantha perceives them. Oh, you mean the actual animals?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that probably comes from the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. I love the idea of that kind of trickster energy. So I think that was probably why. But the actual bunnies they're also white, and that comes, I think, from Samantha as well. Yeah.
Is Samantha a character of color? It's sort of ambiguous.
Yeah, I think she probably is, because there's so much emphasis on the whiteness of the bunnies that would suggest that she might not be fully white herself. But it's ambiguous, and I think part of the reason why it's ambiguous is because my own experience with race is a little bit ambiguous. I'm of mixed heritage. I'm half Egyptian, and some people see me as white, and some people see me as a person of color. And I've never fully felt entitled to claim either identity, even as those identities are informing my interactions with people and my experience of the world. And so I think that's kind of resulted in sort of a sense of maybe tribelessness, maybe unbelonging. That's very ill-defined. And so the natural perspective that I have is probably informing Samantha's natural perspective, and that perspective does put whiteness outside. So I think that is probably why the bunnies are so white.
Yeah, definitely a dark person in contrast to their blondness.
Exactly. Yeah, they are very, that's, yes. And they even have that kind of energy to them, that like cutesiness. It was so much fun to write the bunnies, I have to say.
Oh, no. Remember, there's Vikings. They're not cute.
They are not cute. No, that's true. That's true. The Vikings are not cute. Some of the bunny boys they're very ferocious.
Yes, when they get out of control.
When they get out of control.
Yes, the rabbits can be. They bite and scratch.
That's right. Yeah, that's why it was fun. There was that thrill of danger. Yeah.
So do you think the bunnies dye their hair?
Oh, definitely one of them does. Cupcake, she for sure dyes her hair. There's no way that it could be that. I mean, there was one point in the book where she dyes it the color of cupcake icing, and it's lavender. She definitely dyed it in that case. And the Duchess has silver hair.
Do you think that is manufactured as well?
Maybe. Yeah, I can see that being
Heightened a bit, maybe
Yeah.
just heightened a bit.
yeah, I can see that being part of her mystique, you know, to
Mm.
kind of go a little bit further with the silver. Very unlikely that somebody in their 20s would have like such silver gleaming hair.
Yeah, it's very interesting to trace the blondes and the brunettes from the 19th century into the 20th, and finally into the murderous blondes in, for instance, Raymond Chandler novels.
Right. Yes.
So having started out in the 19th century as the Rowena versus the Rebecca, the sort of desirable, housewifely, not threatening, not exotic Anglo-Saxon person in Walter Scott. You then go all the way through Daisy and the Great Gatsby.
Right.
Not an entirely nice person.
No.
And then into the actual murderesses in Chandler.
Right. Right.
So you're picking up with the Chandler version of the blonde.
That's right. Yeah. The kind of the more dangerous, the more sinister.
Dangerous, sinister,
Yeah.
blonde people.
Oh, we have a
You get
fun
Archie comics, of course. Betty is blonde. Betty is blonde and bakes brownies. She's very wholesome. And Veronica
Yeah.
is dark and quite dangerous.
I was obsessed with Veronica as a kid in the Archie comics.
Because she got away with stuff.
She did so much.
So a lighter question is, how do you think the bunnies would have handled being isolated apart from one another during this pandemic?
Oh my God.
The bunny girls,
Yes.
female, not the bunny men. Ooh, Mona, what do you think?
I think there would be a lot of crazed texting and a lot of emojis exchanged, a lot of I miss yous, a lot of Zoom calls, probably nightly Zoom calls that were mandatory for the group. But yeah, I think it would have been difficult for them to separate, at least initially. Who knows, maybe they would come into their own and begin kind of like separating and discovering agency. But I think at first it would be very painful. Yeah.
And Mona, are you working on a new book? And how do you choose a direction for your next book?
Well, I just finished my third book, and it's called All's Well, and it's based on All's Well That Ends Well. And it's about a theater professor who has chronic pain, who is putting on a production of All's Well That Ends Well with a mutinous cast of students. They all want to put on Macbeth, and she doesn't want to. And so she I won't spoil it, but it's All's Well That Ends Well on stage, and off stage it's Macbeth. So it's been very fun.
Oh, really? Woo.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very complex.
Yeah, it was incredible to write. I got very wrapped up in both plays, because they're both about characters. Helen and Macbeth, the two protagonists of those plays, they're both about characters who circumvent the natural order of things to get their hearts, or to get what they want, right? But in the comedy, in All's Well That Ends Well, there's no price to pay for that. But in Macbeth, there really is. So it was fun to kind of explore the offstage version of that, and then the onstage, and kind of see how the two of them inform each other. So comedy on stage, and then very dark tragedy offstage.
Did you ever see the Japanese Kurosawa version of Macbeth?
I haven't. Is it great?
It actually is. It's very misty.
Oh.
How he handles the witches, because they don't have that tradition, but they have a different tradition. So he uses Japanese equivalents of things in Macbeth. I think you would enjoy it.
Yeah, I will definitely
And
watch
it's
it.
black and white.
It's black and white. Yeah. No, I want to see that.
Throne of Blood. Is it called Throne of Blood? Possibly.
Throne of Blood.
If you put in Kurosawa Macbeth, you'll find it.
Okay. Throne of Blood. Yeah, I was a huge fan of Hagseed. Loved it.
Yes, I had a lot of fun doing that. And as you know, when you're doing these things, some of it is problem solving.
Yeah.
Like, how do you find a solution in the novel form to these? If you're trying to do equivalence,
Right.
how do you find the equivalent of the thing in the play?
Right. Yeah, I thought you did it beautifully. I love The Tempest. So
Yes, so do I.
yeah.
Well, when this project was presented, I was one of the first people who got asked, and I said, if I'm going to do The Tempest, and if I can't do The Tempest, I don't really want to do any other play.
What is it about The Tempest for you?
It's the play in which Shakespeare comes closest to putting on stage what he actually did.
Right.
So Prospero is a creator, director of a theater piece called The Tempest. He has a special effects guy called Ariel, without which he wouldn't have been able to do it.
Right.
And he's invisible to the other characters most of the time.
Yeah.
As a director is. Anyway, it was endlessly fascinating, and it is about prisons.
Yeah.
Everybody in the play is in a prison at one time or another. So I worked backwards. I worked backwards from the speech, which last words are "set me free," and then you have to say, "Set you free from what?"
Right.
Imprisoning you. Well, it turns out that what is imprisoning him is the play.
Right.
Yeah, he needs to get out of the play. Anyway, very, very interesting to work it backwards. And to top it off, I then got an email from a man who runs an theater arts in prison program, saying, can we do a play of your novel, which is about a play being put on in a prison?
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So several boxes within boxes. And of course I said, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So they're working on that right now. And if I'm still alive, I will, and we can go places again, I will certainly be there.
Oh my goodness. I will be there. Yeah.
It's in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
Be very interesting.
Yeah. No, I would love to see that. That's incredible.
Yeah, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Be my guest. I think I can have a guest. You can be my guest.
Wonderful. I would love that.
Perfect. So for our last question of the evening, both of you have written about dysfunctional relationships between female friends. Why do you think that female friendships...
They never happen in real life.
No, not ever.
No, never.
Every friendship is just perfect. I think, why do you think female friendships provide such a rich material? It seems to be something we go back to again and again. And to just sort of pivot off of this question, I'd be curious if you think it has anything to do with the female gaze versus the male gaze in the writing.
Once upon a time, long, long ago, I was a camp counselor. And I was a camp counselor with a cabin full of little 7-year-old boys, because their previous camp counselor, who had been a male, had let one of the little boys go the entire summer without having a bowel movement. And that child had to be roto-rooted at the end of the summer. So for this new year, the director had decided that there should be 2 female counselors because, of course, we're much more attentive to such things. And what could be observed is that in the cabinfuls of little boys, there was a stable hierarchy. So Neil was top because he was best at baseball. So there's a hierarchy, and there are reasons for the hierarchy. So Mark was second because although he sucked at baseball, he had the largest collection of baseball cards and had memorized all the statistics. So this was how the 7-year-old hierarchy was arranged, and it didn't change the whole summer. It was stable. In Cabins of Little Girls, and you'll back me up, Mona,
Yeah.
there were shifting hierarchies. It was much more like a sort of Byzantine court. You know, people were in favor, then they were not in favor. You didn't know why. Whispering campaigns went on. There were no external reasons for why a person was popular and then wasn't popular. And it was just impenetrable. So that has part of it is that female friendships are more mysterious. You can't kind of figure them out a lot of the time. And they're more devious and oblique. So this is what you're describing partly in Bunny.
Yeah.
So even when they're pretending to be friendly to her, they're making these innuendo remarks that could have another interpretation.
Yeah.
So it's shifting ground. You never quite know where you are. And typically, male people might have an outright fight. You know, they might even have a fisticuffs. The little boy certainly did, but then it would be over.
Right.
It would be out on the table. You'd have it out, you know, bam, bam, bam. We settled that. Something was determined. Whereas the girls would just cut the other girl out.
Yep.
Like just wouldn't speak to her, or they would not speak to her very much. Is this right, Mona?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So rather than saying, I really objected to what you said about my shoelaces and we need to settle this, they would just deflect.
Right. Right. No, it's so true. That's why I love Cat's Eye so much, because it just narrates that so beautifully. Sabir and I were actually talking about that just before you came on, how much we love that there's no real reason, there's no rhyme or reason for how these things happen, how these hierarchies emerge, and that's also true for Bunny. I mean, her outsiderness, there's only so much you can really explain about why the bunnies band together and why she's outside. Some of it is just mystery, and that's what's so fascinating. And it's fascinating how cruelty and intimacy and friendship can be so bound together, even in just one statement. You know, like, so I just find that endlessly fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that can be true of male friendships too.
Well, that is true. Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with, okay, what country are you in? What level of class hierarchy are you in? How does communication take place in different at different levels in different countries? So if you're going to have a fight with somebody, do you hit them, or do you make a sort of cutting remark, or do you just do them down in some financial deal? And how is enmity expressed? Enmity and competition. How is friendship expressed? And that's why human beings are so endlessly various, because there are all sorts of combinations and permutations in the way these things roll out. And I think the only people who are really just not affected by them very much are psychopaths, because they don't care. Actually don't care.
Right. No, that's very true.
Or total narcissists.
Yes.
I don't mention any names because it's all about them. So other people don't really exist. So they don't actually care what other people think of them unless it affects their power and status.
Right.
And they don't care about the other people really. They just care about the effect on them.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, exactly right.
Hi everyone, popping back in. I hate to do it. We could go on all night, but we are going to start bringing this wonderful chat to a close. I want to thank you both, Mona and Margaret, for doing this. It's been wonderful. And to everyone who's watching, if you'd like to get a copy of Bunny or a copy of the Testaments, there are links in the chat now. And I wanted to let you know also that all of this event is free, because we want people to be able to be engaged, but 10% of our book sales from tonight from this event will be donated to Black Lives Matter. So I just want to make sure you knew about that. And thank you.
And thank you very much. Mona, a pleasure. We'll follow up on that. Let's go to the Hagseed performance.
My goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Sabine.
night.
Great. And I hope the bookstore is going to be open again pretty soon. And I hope you're doing okay during this extremely difficult time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have our fingers crossed we'll be back to business soon enough.
Mm.
All right, everyone, have a lovely night.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. Bye-bye.